Hey everybody, Bob Gager from Adobe here, and it's time to hang out with Bob, where I get to share some tips and tricks and techniques about Photoshop Elements with all of you in a live session that hopefully you can attend live. If not, you might be watching this after the fact, the recording, but that works too. If you are attending live, just maybe some logistics, over on the side panel, on the right-hand side of your Google Hangouts window, should be a questions. I think it's over here, along here somewhere. Should be a panel where you can ask some questions. If it's not showing, then up here somewhere, up in there somewhere, there should be a little square of 9 little dots, 3x3 grid. Click on that, and it gives you some choices of what to show. Go ahead and show the questions panel. And then just if I'm doing anything, showing anything that's not making sense, feel free to ask a question. I'll come back and check often to make sure that there aren't any open questions from you all, and if there are, I'll do my best to answer them. So with the logistics out of the way, let's get going. All right, let me share my screen, because instead of looking at me, I'm sure you would like to see kind of what I'm doing, what I'm seeing. So I'm just going to go share my entire screen and share. There we go. All right, so today's Hangout with Bob, I'm going to focus in on changing backgrounds. I did a tutorial as part of the Ask Bob series, gosh, probably a couple years ago, around how to change a background. That's posted up on YouTube. If you want to see any of the Ask Bob tutorials, just go to YouTube, search for the Photoshop Elements channel, and in there you'll see the Ask Bob series. So lots of great questions answered there. But the question keeps coming up around how to change backgrounds. Most recently, that question came in from Denise through our Facebook page. And so I was, you know, kind of talking back and forth with Denise in the messages section of our Photoshop Elements Facebook page. And I decided this actually would make a great subject for this week's Hangout with Bob. So here we go. Denise was kind enough to post the image that she wants to change the background on. Sounds like she's taken a bunch of images and the folks want the background to be black instead of white. So let's go see how we do that. Denise, if you're tuning in, thanks so much for sharing your photo. I love working with Elements users' photos instead of my photos. Of course, I've always got a photo I can use as a demo, but hopefully it makes a whole lot more sense to people if I'm actually using the photo that they are asking about. So let me switch over to Photoshop Elements. This is Photoshop Elements 14. The very latest version. Many of the things that I'm going to show off today will work in earlier versions, but depending upon how far back or old in a version that you are, the user interface may look a little bit different, but the techniques would all be the same. But of course, if you want to see on your computer exactly what I'm showing here on my computer, then moving up to Elements 14, of course, would be a great idea. All right, so with a little commercial out of the way, let's get to changing backgrounds. Okay, first thing I need to do is open Denise's photo. So here in the Photoshop Elements editor, I am in expert mode. A lot of the stuff that we're going to look at today requires you to be in expert mode. So if you're not already an expert, maybe you're in quick, or maybe you're in Elements Live, or maybe you've been guided, just go ahead and click up here and switch over to expert mode. You also want to make sure your layers panel, that's this big lighter gray panel over on the right-hand side. Let me highlight my mouse, right? So here we go. So this big gray thing over here, this is our layers panel. If yours is not showing, that's what these buttons along the bottom are for. You may look like this, where you don't have the layers panel showing. Go ahead and click on this layer button down on the bottom, and that'll open up your layers panel. Now, no layers are showing because we don't have a photo open yet. So let's do that. Over here on the top left is our open button. Lots of ways to open photos in the Photoshop Elements editor. I can either bring them in from the organizer, I can do a file open, of course, and navigate to wherever that is, or the shortcut is just click this open button right here, and that's the same as doing a file open. Now I've taken Denise's photo and dropped it on my desktop, so I'll just go double click that to open it, and here we go. Also maybe worth mentioning is that I'm showing you Photoshop Elements 14 on a Macintosh computer. Everything that I'm going to show today works exactly the same on Windows. I know a lot of folks out there on Windows as well. So don't worry about the fact I'm using a Mac. It will work exactly the same on your Windows machine. All right, so we've got Denise's shot open here, and Denise's request, or actually the request of, I guess it's the lady, the mom in this family, sounded like she wanted, instead of that bright white background of the wall they were in front of, it looks like she wants it to be a black background. So let's go through that. All right, now the important thing that we're going to be using in sort of this technique is layers and layered masks. Now, this isn't really a deep dive on layers and layer masks, but they are necessary to use to achieve the effect. Unless I just wanted, I could always just grab a brush and, black and just start painting, but that becomes kind of hard when I'm painting around hair, and if I make a mistake, it's kind of a nightmare. So, that's certainly one way to do it, is just paint black on top of your photo, but I don't want to do that. So I want to use the power of Photoshop Elements and the power of layers and layer masks to really make this a very powerful technique and get some great results. If you are not familiar with layers and layer masks, probably a quick Google search. Just go out, type to Google, type in Photoshop Elements Layers Explained, and you'll probably find 10,000 or so tutorials on what layers are all about. And also layer masks. So that'll give you a little more deeper dive, but I'll try and explain it as we go. Basically, what layers are is over here on the right. This is our layers panel. Think of layers as stacks of photos that are on top of each other. And if I stack a bunch of photos, like let me add a new layer, this little button here will add a new layer called layer 1 on top of our background photo. That's our original photo. And if I just click this button, it creates an empty layer. So this little checkerboard look, that means that there's really no pixels there. And if I have that layer selected, I can grab my brush. Let me pick a different color besides black, maybe a red. I can paint on that layer with red, but I'm not actually painting on my photo. I'm painting on this clear layer that's on top of my photo. So as I look down through all the layers, it looks like I've painted on my photo, but I haven't. If I hide the layer, this little eyeball here is a way that I can very quickly hide that layer. And so the red goes away. I can show that layer and the red comes back. If I add another layer and paint with maybe some green on that layer, right, it's at the very top. So as I paint with green, it's on top of the red. It's on top of the photo. It's at the very bottom of the stack. And so anywhere I paint green, the red is hidden because the red is underneath it. I can also rearrange layers. So if I drag this over here on the right, if I drag this green layer down below the red layer, now suddenly the red is on top of the green, so I see the red and it hides the green. So hopefully that's enough of kind of a tutorial on what layers are if you're not familiar with them already. But understanding the layers really opens up a lot of power of Photoshop Elements. And so I use them all the time. All right, let's get rid of these sort of demo layers. I'm just going to drag and drop the green layer to the trash can. I'm going to drag and drop the red layer to the trash can. And we now are back to just this one layer, our original photo. Now, often when I'm working with a photo, I want to not have it be a background layer. Photoshop Elements, when I open up a JPEG file, automatically creates the new layer as a background. And so just double click on the layer thumbnail over here on the right. I get this dialog box here, and just click OK. And that's going to convert it to a regular old non-background layer. All right, so now the next thing that we want to talk about is making selections. So we want to turn this white background into black. The first thing that we want to do that is make a selection, something called a selection of that white background. Now there's a bunch of different ways to make selections over here. This is a selection section of our tool panel. This one in the bottom right are a number of quick selection tools. So go ahead and click on the bottom right one here. This one is currently showing the Refine Selection brush. It probably will show the Quick Selection brush if you've never changed it. But go ahead and click on that, and then down in the bottom, if your tool options are not showing, currently my photo bin is showing, just click on Tool Options. And there are actually 4 different selection brushes hidden under this one choice up here. And the one we want to start off with is this one here called the Quick Selection brush. So go ahead and make sure that this one here is selected. It says Quick Selection here. If any of the others are selected, then just go click Quick Selection, and you're using the Quick Selection brush. And the way you want to use the Quick Selection brush is you can set its size. The size that's appropriate is really going to depend on your photo. For this particular photo, we probably want maybe about 30 or 40. I don't know. You don't have to set an exact size. So you can use this slider to set the size. One keyboard shortcut that's really important to know if you're doing a lot of brush work is the keyboard shortcut for setting the brush size. And that's the right and left bracket keys. And so the right and left brackets are the keys to the right of the P key on your keyboard. So look at your P key, those two keys to the right, the left bracket and the right bracket. If I press the left bracket, my brush is smaller. If I press the right bracket, my brush gets bigger. So if you're doing a lot of brush work, you're always changing the size of your brush. Knowing the left and right bracket keyboard shortcut is really going to save you a lot of time. So with the Quick Selection brush selected, kind of make it about that big. And then all I have to do is drag over this white background. And you can see the marching ants show my selection. And so what the Quick Selection brush does is looks for edges of things. So as I'm dragging, it's doing a bunch of complicated edge detection work on my photo, finding where there are edges of things, and automatically expanding the selection up against the edges. And so I'm just going to do a real first cut pass, just dragging across the background. You see it's kind of selected all around here. So everywhere we've got this white is selected. Now it's gotten a little aggressive because the hair here is kind of the same color or a similar color as the background. And if I hold my Alt or Option key down, it turns into a minus sign. So you can see here it's a plus sign. If I hold my Alt or Option key down, it turns into a minus sign. And then I drag where I don't want the selection. So I want to clean it up a little bit around the side of the hair here. And actually maybe zoom in a little bit to get a better look at things. And so by clicking my zoom tool over here on the top of my tool options bar, if I double click that, it's going to zoom in a 1-to-1 ratio. So that's a really easy way to quickly get to 1-to-1, just to double click there. If I hold my space key down on my keyboard, whatever tool I have selected turns into the hand tool. And with the hand tool, I can drag my photo around. So if I need to reposition things, I want to use the hand tool. I can get there very quickly with just the space key. All right, so back to my Quick Selection brush. Now I need a smaller, now that I'm zoomed in, I need a smaller brush. So I want to use my left bracket key to make it small and just fine tune things a bit, right? I don't want this boy's ear. I've over selected into his ear. So hold your Alt or Option key down, turns into a minus, which is removing from my selection, and drag around his ear to kind of get it a little better. Now I don't have to be perfect. I just want to get pretty close. Closer the better, of course. I've got some decisions to make. This kind of grayish bar across the back of the black background, I need to decide whether I want that in or out of my selection. I actually want it in. So I'm just going to drag down a little further, and you can see the Quick Selection tool is helping me make that selection. In fact, I'm going to go all the way down this complete background here. Same thing here in the middle, right? So keep selecting down. It went a little too far. So again, Alt or Option to turn it into a deselection mode and just kind of drag up here. Again, I don't need to be perfect, but the better I do on the first pass, the better results I'm going to get. Fine tune around the hair a little bit. We've got too much selected here. Now hair is a really tricky thing to select. I'm going to come back to that in just a second to show you how we can do some nice selection around hair. Maybe get a little more here, not quite that much. And you can see this sort of process. There's a little bit of work involved. You got to go back and forth until you get the right selection. Looks like we've got this guy here, maybe a little less around his ear. And this guy here is pretty good. Let's do a little more selection over on the right. Let's go ahead and get all of that kind of different colored background. Again, it got over on the black sleeve. We don't want that. We just want kind of this stuff here. So fine tune it a little bit until you get pretty close. There we go, something like that. All right, so now we've got a pretty good selection of this background that we want to change from white to black, but we've still got this challenge of hair. And we actually have a tool that helps you select hair, of course. That's this one right here. So back down in our options, tool options, with our selection tools selected here, we have a number of different selection tools. This one right here, the Refine Selection Brush, is what we want to use for hair. So go ahead and click on that. And what that does is show you kind of this view here where everything that's not selected, we sort of do this red overlay. Don't worry, it's temporary. I haven't messed up the photo. And anywhere it is selected, we don't show the red. So you can see here where the hair is, there's a bunch of hair here that's sticking out. Now I can change the view. I can do like on black, that will show what I don't have selected on black. And you can see I don't have any of that hair selected. Or on white. So there's different ways to visualize what it is that I've got selected. Overlay is really nice. It just sort of shows this red of what's not selected. All right, now this tool is can be pretty complex, but I'm just going to use some easiness of it. I want to make sure I'm in push mode. So there's a couple different modes of the tool right here. There's add to selection, subtract from selection, or push selection. So put it in push mode and bring your cursor up and hover over the edge between the red and the white. And you can see if I'm outside this cursor is a plus sign, it would let me push my selection further. If I'm inside the red, it's a minus sign, it would let me move or remove some of my selection. And if I hover right over the edge, it just turns into a dot. Hover right over the edge so it's a dot, push down and hold your mouse, and just do a little bit of painting over the hair. And the magic of Photoshop Elements is going to look at that edge, figure out where the hair is, and then when you let go, it's going to automatically select the hair. So you can see now I've got the hair red, or I'm sorry, deselected. I've got the hair red because I don't want the hair selected. I only want the white background selected. And so the white is even poking through strands of hair. So this is a real great way to fine-tune the selection around edges where you have fuzzy or furry things like hair that you need to do a nice mask selection on. So I'm going to just drag around the edge everywhere there's hair. Not a whole lot of hair here, but there's enough that it's useful to kind of fuzz that up a little bit. I want to do all down the side here to do a better job of selecting that hair. And around the top a little bit, around this side, and sort of bring that hair into the deselected mode. And then finally, let's get this kid over here on the left. Let's just drag around over top of his hair using this Refine Selection Brush so we can get that hair selected. All right, so now we've got this selection made. What we want to do is create what's called a layer mask with this selection. Now this tool up in the top right, this tool right here is our Add Layer Mask tool. And when I click on that, it's going to create a layer mask on whatever layer I have selected. Now, I have layer 0 selected. It's the only layer I have. Within that layer selected, I've got all this white background selected. I'm kind of using the word selected many times for multiple reasons. The red stuff is not selected. If I hold my Alt or Option key down when I click the Add Layer Mask, what it's going to do is create a mask that hides everything I have selected. So just hold your Alt or Option key down, depending upon whether you're on Windows or Mac, and click this mask. And you can see what that's done is created another little thumbnail here. Everywhere I had the white selected, it painted black in my layer mask. Everywhere I did not have something selected in my photo, it painted white in my layer mask. And the way layer masks work is everywhere it's painted black, that part of the layer is hidden. Everywhere it's painted white, that part of the layer is shown. So as an example, I can come in with my brush tool, just kind of your standard brush tool over here. Go ahead and select that and pick either black or white. If I change it to white, so white is my foreground color, and I come over here, let me make my brush a little bit bigger. There we go, make my brush a little bit bigger, and start painting here. You see I'm painting white on the mask, and I'm by this little blue rectangle here shows me that my mask is selected. I'm painting on my mask with white. You can see right there, I've got a little bit of white painted. And wherever I paint white on my mask, whenever I paint white on my mask, it shows through. If I switch to paint with black, then it's going to hide that layer. So, oops, I've got my opacity set to 10%. I want it all the way up at 100%. So as I paint on my layer mask with black, it's going to hide that part of my layer. Nope, why does my opacity keep dropping down? I don't want that. There we go. So I can selectively show or hide things just by painting white or black on my layer mask. Now there's a couple touch-ups I want to do. Looks like we got a little kind of funky selection around this kid's hair where the background is showing through a little bit. I don't want that. So again, to show it, I want to paint it white. I want to make my brush kind of small and just kind of come in here and fix that up a little bit. Kind of something like that. And so just do a quick audit around the edges to make sure the stuff you want hidden is hidden, the stuff you want showing is showing. Maybe along this hair here, we want to do a little painting with black. Oops, I'm sorry, with white to bring some of the hair back. There we go. So something like that. And again, just look around the edges. Again, earlier I said we didn't have to be perfect because we can fix it back up later by painting black or white with the brush on the mask. All right, so now let's double click our hand tool over here on the top left. If we double click our hand tool, it will resize our image to fit. And now we can go about putting any kind of background behind these folks. Now that's again where the power of layers comes in. If I create a new layer, again, it'll create a layer on the top. If I drag that layer underneath my photo layer, again, if you remember from earlier, everywhere there's nothing showing on this layer, and we masked out the background, the bottom layer is going to show through. So you ask to have this background be black. If I make my painting color black, and I pick my paint bucket tool, and I make sure this layer 0, the one that I drag to the bottom, is selected, and just click with my paint bucket, it's going to fill that entire layer with black. And so now I've got these folks on top of the black background. I still have the layer mask, so if I wanted to fine-tune the selection, so like maybe this brightness along the guy's shoulder, the dad's shoulder here, I didn't want it to be quite that bright, I can zoom in and again select my layer mask on the layer that has my picture on it and use black to paint with because I want to hide it. Use my brush tool. I probably want a pretty small brush here and just kind of paint right along this edge. So I'm not actually painting black on the photo, I'm painting black on the mask, which means I'm hiding it. Remember, if I paint with white, so I switch to white. Oh, and there's a keyboard shortcut I use a lot for switching my foreground and background painting color. You can either use this little arrow to swap them back and forth, right over here on the left-hand side. That will swap them back and forth. Or if you press the X, excuse me, the X key on your keyboard, that will exchange X for exchange the foreground color with the background color. So again, if I'm painting with white, my image is going to be shown, right? So I'm painting with white, which is causing my white background to show through. If I paint with black, I get to hide that background. And so I can fine-tune things along the edges where they don't look quite right, and by painting either black or white onto my layer mask. And so again, a quick audit now that we've got this black background to see if there's anywhere else that needs a little bit of fine-tuning. Oh, maybe up here where I was messing with stuff. I want to fix that up. I didn't really quite paint it all out. See that? And that's how we swap out a background from white to black. Now, Photoshop Elements, of course, can handle as many layers as I want. So if I create another layer, and let's just drag it down below our photo. Again, if I want maybe instead of black, maybe a dark blue as my background. I can just pick the color I want. Again, use my paint bucket tool with this layer selected and click, and it's going to paint blue everywhere on that layer. So you can see now I still have my black layer, but on top of my black layer is a blue layer. On top of my blue layer is my photo, and then the background is masked away so I can't see it. Basically, I can see through that layer wherever I painted the black, and I can see the blue layer. So I can try different things with my photo to really get the look that I'm after just by simply dropping different colors in the background. In fact, we have a bunch of backgrounds that ship with Photoshop Elements. So down here in the bottom right corner are a bunch of different panels. This one called Graphics. If you click on Graphics, up here you can pick the type of graphic you're after. Or there's lots of ways to show all the graphics by type, by activity, by color, right? Lots of different things. Just click by type, and then the other one will be the type of graphics that we have to pick backgrounds. And then all you need to do is drag and drop one of these backgrounds onto your photo. So say I want to put this family in front of some balloons. Just drag and drop. Switch back to layers. It created since it was a background, it created a layer at the very bottom with my balloons. Now that layer is hidden because I have a black layer and a blue layer, but if I click the little eyeball and hide the blue layer, now I'm seeing black because it's still showing. If I click the little eyeball and hide the black layer, I can now see the balloons at the very bottom layer behind my folks. So I can actually have a lot of fun here. I can switch back to my graphics, make sure by type is selected and background is selected, and I can peruse around to find graphics that might look interesting. And again, when I find one I want to try, just drag and drop. It will replace the balloons with this kind of mottled tannish look. I don't really like that. Maybe let's try, I don't know, something different. Some red and white dots or checkerboards or whatever this is. Yeah, there you go. So it's really easy to start to try different things by just dragging and dropping these backgrounds, and Photoshop Elements will swap out the background that's there with whatever you drag and drop. You may have noticed these little blue things on some of the backgrounds. All of these backgrounds are up on a server. We don't actually fill your hard drive full of backgrounds that you never use. So this little blue one means it hasn't been downloaded yet. So if I drag and drop one that has a blue sash on the top right corner, you'll see a download first happens, there it goes, and then the background is applied. Now that background is on my hard drive, the blue thing is gone, and I can use it without having to download it every time. So you can play around with lots of different backgrounds until you get a look that kind of looks interesting to you. But you wanted black, so let's just go back and re-show a black background, and there you go. All right, let me switch back to the Google Hangouts thing to see if there are any questions. No questions. I see we've got one viewer. That's great. If you happen to have a question, now would be a great time to answer it. I'll come back here in just a second and see what your question is. But that's the basic process for selecting a background, dealing with edges like hair using the Refine Selection brush, and then using layers to experiment with different backgrounds, whether it be black or blue or one of the graphic files that we include with the software, or if you've got your own picture of an interesting background that you want to put your main subject in front of. Just open it up, drag and drop it into the image. Let me kind of show you how to do that. Let me open up my organizer. I probably should have planned ahead for this one. I don't know that I have a good background file, but you know, what the heck, we'll just go pick a photo and drag and drop it in there. All right, maybe one of these. No, I don't want to back up right now. So I'm just going to right click and say edit with Photoshop Elements Editor. That is going to go ahead and open up this file. Now this is a photo I shot in RAW format. So I get Adobe Camera Raw. If you get that, you can do some adjustments here or just click Open Image, and that will open up a new image. So now if I switch to my photo bin, I've actually got both images open. Click on this photo, drag and drop my torchlight photo. That will drop it in. It will drop it on top. So again, I need to drag it behind the family. And you can see now I've got my torchlights behind the family. I might want to use my Move tool to move them up a little bit or resize them or whatever I might want to do. Right. Again, I didn't kind of plan ahead. on using a photo, one of my own photos as a background, but that's how you would do it. So either our backgrounds, solid backgrounds, or photos as a background. Switch back to Google Hangouts. Carol, hey Carol, thanks for joining. Explain the backgrounds on Photoshop 14 again. Okay, sure. So let me delete this layer that was created when I dragged and dropped the background. And again, to delete any layer, just drag it to this little trash can icon right here and let go, and that'll delete the layer. You could also press the delete key, but then it asks you, are you sure you really want to delete? It's just faster to drag and drop them off to the trash can. So I'm going to drag all of them, right? Get rid of the blue. No, I'll leave the black. All right, so backgrounds down here in the bottom, these different buttons that change which panel is shown on the right. One of the panels is called graphics. If I click on graphics, my graphics panel shows over here. Now we've got a lot of graphics that we ship with the product. I'll switch the first pull down to just show all. And it will show just tons of stuff. We've got backgrounds, we've got frames, we've got clip art, we've got shapes, we've got some fonts, we've got just all kinds of artwork that is shipped with the product that you can use to embellish your photos. If instead of show all right here, I select by type. So there's lots of ways that you can filter this list. I could do by color, right? So if I pick by color, beige, it's only going to show me graphics that have beige in them, or maybe burgundy if I'm trying to do a burgundy design, or maybe silver, right? So I can filter my graphics by color, or by event, or by mood, or by season. If I want, spring graphics, then it'll filter down to just springy kind of graphics. So I'm working with backgrounds, so I want to change this first pull down to by type. And then the second background, there's different types of graphics. There's text, there's shapes, there's just general clip art kind of stuff. There's frames if I wanted to put my photo in a frame, and of course there's backgrounds. So just switch to by type to backgrounds, and then you can scroll through all the different backgrounds. And to apply one, it's as simple as dragging and dropping. So maybe let's put them this sort of green leafy thing. I want to do that. Just click on it, hold your mouse key down, drag it over on top of your photo, and let go. Photoshop Elements knows it's a background, and so it's going to drop it in the bottommost position of your layers, and anything that is see-through or transparent above it will show through. So again, let me switch back to layers. You can see this background layer wasn't there before I did the drag and drop. Now, one of the cool things is since the background layer is there, if I switch back to my backgrounds and drag and drop a different one, it will actually replace the existing background layer. So I don't have to worry about dragging and dropping a bunch of them and deleting layers that I dragged earlier. Photoshop Elements is smart enough to just replace the background layer that's there to begin with. So you can experiment around with lots of different ones. Looks kind of interesting, but maybe a darker one looks interesting, like that. Or let's put them in front of some curtains. All these different backgrounds can be used. Experiment around until you find one that is interesting to you. Maybe in front of some, if it's Christmas time, I might want to put them in front of some Christmas wrapping paper. Who knows what you might want to do. So hopefully I went slow enough this second time. Sorry, Carol, I do tend to go fast sometimes. But there you go. Let me switch back. Okay. You tried to do it, and it still hasn't changed your background. Hard to know. Let's see. Make sure you're in expert mode. Make sure your layers panel is showing and that there isn't some other layer that's hiding. So you can see when I drag and drop these backgrounds, it puts it at the very bottom of this stack of layers. And so even though I have this Christmas paper background here in my layers panel as my background, on top of it I have this black layer. and so it's completely hiding that. So double check that you probably only have 2 layers. Let me actually delete this layer. So you can see I've got the layer that has my photo on it with the area masked off where I want my background to show through, and then I've got my background layer. Hopefully that's your problem. Without seeing your screen, I don't know for sure, but give that a try. Let me switch back to Google. There we go. Do I have to have a background layer selected in order to drop a background? No, if you don't have a background layer already in your layer stack, let me go delete this one. Let me go delete that. So at this point, I only have 1 layer. I have, a mask on that layer, so I can see through that layer to anything that's underneath it. Now I don't have anything underneath it at this point, so I'm just seeing the checkerboards. If I switch to graphics and I drag and drop one of these backgrounds, it'll download it if I don't already have it. If I switch back to layers, you can see it was smart enough to create the background layer for me. So you don't have to have one already there. If one doesn't exist, then Elements will create it. That's my problem. I don't have a layer mask selected. Yeah, in order to see through, you have to have a layer mask. If you don't have a layer mask, if I go delete my layer mask, then even though I have this background underneath, well, there's nothing showing through because that layer is completely hiding any layers underneath. Now I can partially make a layer see-through by using that mask technique. I could also just erase. So, another way to do it is just to use my eraser tool and come over here and erase this layer. And wherever I erase, anything underneath it will show through. But, even though this works, if I make a mistake and, oops, I erased that guy's head, I've erased that guy's head. And, right now I can do an undo and get back. But if I was to save this file and come back, a couple days later, undo wouldn't work anymore. Where if I've got a mask instead, if I create a mask, oops, I created a layer, didn't want to do that. So I'm going to delete that layer. If I create a mask, this little button right here, and then start painting on the mask with black. Again, anywhere I paint on a mask with black, that mask is hidden, so I can hide stuff just by painting black on the mask. You can see here I painted kind of the top corner with black. If I make a mistake, it's like, oops, I obliterated the guy's face. If I was to save this file and come back a week later, I'd still have my mask, and to fix that, all I have to do is switch to painting with white. And now when I paint with white on my mask, that layer shows. So again, where I painted black is hidden, where I painted white is showing. Now I use the selection brush because this particular photo has some hairy edges, so to speak. And using the selection tool and the refine selection brush is a way to deal with that. I could, of course, zoom way in and do it with the brush and kind of the old way, if you will. Get a tiny little brush and paint with black in these spots to get it to show through, but I don't have that kind of time in my day to go do it that way. That's why I use that technique I showed you earlier, using the quick selection to do that really first initial rough selection, and then using the refine selection brush to fine tune things. And I could do it this way, but boy, that's a whole lot of work. Okay, back to Google to see if there are any other questions. Layer mask select. All right, so hopefully you got that, Carol, and your background is showing through. All right, folks, that's kind of it. We went a little over our 30 minutes, but that's fine. Carol had a couple really good questions, and hopefully that illuminated things that I went through a little too quickly with folks. Thanks for attending this Hangout with Bob. This session is recorded, so you can always come back and watch it again, go through and pause the video and all that kind of good stuff. So the stuff I went through too fast, sorry about that. If you watch it maybe an extra time or two, it'll make sense. And Carol, thanks for attending live. It's always good to have someone watching live and asking some questions, because that's how we get these tips and tricks presented in a way that really makes sense to you guys. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. If you have something that you'd like me to cover in the next Hangout with Bob, probably the easiest way is to go to our Facebook page. Switch back to Facebook, and in the messages section, post a message, and if it seems like an appropriate subject to do a Hangout with Bob over, we'll schedule it for the next week. All righty, folks, take care, and we'll see you all at the next Hangout with Bob.